I'm Benton Jones. I'm the Director of Art here at the Cape Cod Museum of Art, and I had the great pleasure of working on Ralph Menconi's Mocha, which was a sculpture he made when he was attending Yale University. There's some images of, you'll see later some images of other works by Ralph, but he was a very prominent medallic artist, and we have the pleasure of having Ralph Menconi II here with us today, who was the commissioner of this piece. Welcome, Ralph. My background actually was in sculpture. I went to Carnegie Mellon University and majored in sculpture, and then worked at the Johnson Atelier, which was the 4th largest art foundry in the world, located in Trenton, New Jersey. And Seward Johnson from the Johnson & Johnson fame was the proprietor, and so I worked sometimes directly with him, but I also got to work with a lot of well-known New York City-based artists, Joel Shapiro, Beverly Pepper, Francis Jolly. There's just a long list of people that I got to work with directly, and it was a great start to my young career. And I ended up getting double pneumonia there working in the patina department. And so I went home to my parents, who are here with us today also, and I was convalescing, and I never left. So I decided that working as a foundry worker for other people was probably not a healthy life choice, but doing it for myself was something I still wanted to pursue. So I bought a welder, and I started to make all my own equipment. I made my foundry equipment, my welding tables, and basically built a foundry from scratch. And I actually found a video just this morning of one of those early days in the foundry here. Here it is. Let's see if I can get it to... So there's my foundry equipment. There's the crucible that I'm lifting out right on that table over there. And my friends George Perez are there, who's still a good friend of mine. And we're doing a lost wax ceramic shell method, and that's the way Mocha was made also. There's different methods for casting. There's sand casting, there's ceramic shell casting, and we'll get into some of that later. But yeah, it was fun to uncover this after, I'm in my 20s there, so 30 years ago. But you can imagine that crucible probably weighs 30 pounds without any metal in it. Imagine filled to the brim with bronze. It's pretty heavy. Bronze starts to melt at 1,800, so anywhere between 1,800 and 2,000 degrees, depending on the thickness. You'll see this little piece in front. That's another method. That's a resin casting.
Do you want to cast it?
And has to be perfectly level because it's an open face casting, which is not really recommended. But
Yes, party.
I'll get to all that. So there it is. Yeah. Okay. So I'm actually going to start with a piece that I did that was sand cast just 2 years ago. I got a request from the person who digitized our permanent collection to create an award for one of his salesmen who sold $4 million worth of equipment that year, and they wanted him to have a trident. So I had a bronze rod, and I hired somebody who does engraving in bronze, and so he was the $4 million man, and that's gonna be engraved in the in that rod. So what I did is, this is gonna be the sand casting method, and this is what's called green sand. Sand that you can use over and over again. It's got a clay base and just the right amount of water to hold it together, but not enough to make the metal explode. And so this is going to be the pattern for the trident, and I can use this pattern twice to give me 3 dimensions, and you'll kind of see this as we go. I won't spend too much time on this, but you pack the sand on one side of the pattern. You have what's called a cope and a drag. That's the top and the bottom of the 2 halves of this sand mold, and where there's a little pull cue here, that's where I'm going to be pouring in the bronze. There's the little furnace I was going to use for this, and so there's the cope and the drag together with the hole in it, and this was the pattern that was used to make both the top and the bottom, which were registered to marry together perfectly.
All right, here we are.
This was
take
January
that
1st.
molten bronze. Ben is going to take it.
That's my brother Jamie.
Of there. He's going to lift it up with one of those tools, and he's going to pour it into the mold, which is over there. We're going to bring it out here, though. The mold will be sitting right here when we're ready.
So just filling it with bronze. So these are ingots, but that's what they're called. They're when you have bronze in little chunks like that, they're bronze ingots. I just fidget it in there, or you often preheat it before you put it in, just so it doesn't have any small explosions. Right. Let's see here.
That is the piece that he's making.
So I'm going to keep on going because we have a lot to cover here. That's the kind of the setup. Let's see. Okay, so this is the casting itself, and there's my brother Jamie, and so you use propane and a little fan mixed together, and it heats up the crucible inside that little furnace. So you have to, when it's the right temperature, turn off the gas, lift off the lid. And it all has to be really well thought out beforehand, because there's no time or ability to make any mistakes. You often skim the top of the bronze just before you pour, because there can be some slag, which is what you call the material that rises to the top of the crucible. In historic times, they used to put sand on top to keep the bronze from oxidizing, and that sand would actually turn into glass, and that's how they figured out how to make beads originally is through the bronze casting process. They would have this glass that was a byproduct of bronze casting, and they would twirl it on little ceramic tubes. There's a piece of cardboard on the pill block, which is what you call the thing that's underneath it, and that's so that the carbon makes a carbon separator between the crucible, so it doesn't stick to the pill block. And in this case, it's a one-person job where you have just a single. Usually, you can have two people pouring. The person who's pouring has two handles, and the other person has just one. And the person that has just one pipe is called the dead man for some reason. And that's it. It's filled to the top, and there was a vent hole that I can see it came up in. Okay. So that's breaking it out of the mold. And I knew I wanted to refine this. I just wanted to get the raw bronze first, and you'll see it going through the stages here. That's after the engraving. So you start with grinding off the gates and vents, which are what you call the way that the bronze can get in through where you pour the metal in and where the air vents out. So those have to be removed. Those are gone. Then I'm starting to shape it. It was just the way I decided to do this piece, was to do half of it sculpting in wax, and then the other half to actually just do it right in the bronze. So getting closer to a trident here. And the back, that first part where the metal went in is intended to be the base of the handle of the trident. So there it's coming together. There's the base on the bottom, and I sandblasted it so I could patina it, and then I'm using a cold patina in this case. Mocha got a hot patina, and you'll see that later. And so that's the cold patina, turned it brown, and that's the final trident. So that was the award. It was it was a lot of fun. I was just kind of doing it. He did me a favor by digitizing our permanent collection. They usually work for bigger institutions like the Smithsonian and the Getty, and so he asked me to do a favor, and so I did it, and then we shipped it off to Washington, D.C. Okay, now to Mocha. So I visited Ralph Manconi's house. This project actually, there was an exhibition here in 2001, and the exhibition was a combination of Ralph Manconi's medallic art and also the art of Raphael Manconi, who's Ralph Manconi's father, who is the author of this sculpture, which is a pelican. And so there's a lot of talent in this family. And there's Mocha as you see it over here. This is the plaster version of Mocha, even though they have it, colorized in brown, some kind of coating. And so that was my first glimpse of Mocha. This is also Raphael's piece. Mocha is Ralph's sculpture. Raphael has sculpture. He did the bases for the New York Public Library that were cast at Tiffany, and so Raphael had an incredible career of architectural sculpture. And these are some of Ralph Manconi's medallic art. So these smaller pieces, in metallic art are made in the reverse process than normal. When I say normal, usually somebody would come into the foundry with a maquette, and the maquette would be a small version of what they want enlarged. But with metallic art, you actually make a bigger piece, and then when you bring it to a mint or a foundry, they'll shrink it down, and it actually enhances the detail. So all of these small pieces of metallic art were larger. And there's Ralph Manconi II right here with us today. His dad made his portrait, and I love this piece. You wouldn't even call it relief. It's almost full round. It's incredible. And there is Ralph Manconi Sr. Excuse me. And you can see behind him all of his larger metallic patterns or maquettes that they would have shrunk down. And there's Mocha in plaster. And this is a grouse that Ralph Manconi also made, which is also in a plaster material, which possibly could be another sculpture that we might want to make in bronze. Because there are no bronzes of this, are there, Ralph? No. So it's a real challenge, and it's a real, it's a big responsibility to have something that is one of a kind in plaster, and then be charged with the task of making it in bronze. Because if you ruin it, it's ruined. You're never going to get it back. If like the rubber sticks to it, or somehow the piece drops or anything, you're in big trouble. This is the photo you see on the table there. Do you know who this sculpture is of?
Would have been a business executive. He did commissions for corporations, some CEO in the lobby or something. But I don't know the person's name.
But you can see that Ralph Manconi did much more than metallic art. He did, heroic sculpture. And this just shows you how prolific he was, documenting, the Apollo missions, and various presidents sat for him. Is this Raphael or Ralph?
That's my father. That was also done at Yale. It's wood.
So it's
He did some wood carving at Yale too, at Fine Arts School. My father, that is.
yeah, so it's a wood carving. It's gorgeous. And there was a mention of this in a publication, and it mentions that that Ralph got a prize for this, and puts it in context of him being at Yale when he made it. It's John F. Kennedy. So there's one of Ralph Manconi's metallic art on the cover of Time magazine, of Nixon, obviously. But there are very few sculptors that I know of whose work actually gets on the front of Time magazine. There's is that Lyndon Johnson.
That's in the Oval Office. He was going on a foreign tour, Johnson was, and he wanted some medals to take
Okay.
to South America. He was going to a big conference, and so my father went to the White House twice actually, and had Johnson pose. And Johnson.
I'm going to get you a little microphone,
Okay.
because we have one. Testing, testing. There we go. Part of the show.
This picture was taken by the White House photographer, yeah, probably 1966, I would say. President Johnson was embarking on a foreign tour, and he liked my father's work. Somehow he saw it, I'm not sure exactly, but and so my father went to the White House for Johnson to pose, and he's holding the backing, what would you call that, that the clay is on. And Johnson, of course, as you can see, signed it to Ralph Manconi with appreciation. And we do have copies of the medal that he took along to, it was in South America, a big conference in Montevideo, and he handed those out as a favor, sort of. But they were all large bronze, you know, maybe 4 inches across.
So this is the mold that you see here. So originally, when Ralph asked me to see if I could realize this plaster Mocha in bronze, I thought, well, if you have the mold, it would make it a lot easier. So, and he did have the mold, and so this is the mold that Ralph Manconi made when he was at Yale 88 years ago, and it's really intricate. It's made out of there's at least 20 pieces, and so before the time or before we had rubber, you would have to, any undercuts, you would have to figure out how to engineer so that it would all fit together like a puzzle, so that when you cast something solid into it, you would be able to open up the mold and then extract a positive in order to then translate it into bronze. And I'll just show you some of the pieces here. So like these are, this is like the ear. There was string on here that goes through the top of this mold so that these pieces can slide in and out. And then all along the spine, there's all these intricate pieces and keys. So this mold is made by a master mold maker. Really incredible. But there was one problem. I couldn't use the mold because it was missing a couple pieces that you see. All the pieces again. That's the tip of a TIG welder. So that's how I weld the metal together. The little tip is tungsten. TIG stands for tungsten inert gas welding. And so you have tungsten in the middle, then there's a ceramic cone, and out of the ceramic cone comes argon. This is cooled by water that flows through it. And then in your free hand, you have this bronze filler rod. So you're really a tripod. One, and your foot controls the amount of electricity. So you're standing on one foot, and you've got the filler rod in one hand, the TIG tip in the other hand, and you're in a big mask on. So it's pretty it's pretty crazy. So you see, I created a little V around the plug, and it positioned it just perfectly, and then filled it in by welding. And starting to grind it down. This is the plaster of the base of the piece that Raphael Manconi made it, that's still at the New York Public Library. It's just incredible. If you ever have a chance to go see it in person.
There are two of them. They're flagpole bases right out on Fifth Avenue. And you might notice they're held up by 4 turtles. he loved to include animals in his sculpture. You've seen the squirrel, you have a turkey at home, and of course the pelican. This is supported on the backs of 4 turtles, but this is right there in front of the New York Public Library, 2 of them for flagpoles.
How tall is this?
That's probably 8 feet maybe.
So now it's time to attach the head, and so I have to figure out a way of aligning it perfectly and holding it in place while we put the first tack weld in. So the tack weld is in place. Now I can remove that other stuff and just make sure everything is aligned. I'm using Mocha Master here as my guide to make sure everything is exactly like the original. And I'm starting to weld on the head. Okay, the head's welded on, but there's still a lot of work to do. So we got the head on Mocha and the plug-in Mocha, and so now we can start to do some more finishing and refining, grind down the welds, and mount Mocha to his base, make it to his, and we'll take it from there. So I did bring in some tools. So you can do the initial grinding, something serious, just a right angle grinder and a grinding wheel. Start with roughing it out with that. Then this is a carbide tipped grinder, and let's see, handy air, blow things off. So these are pneumatic tools. So you could also remove a lot of material with that. Then you can do the finer refining with smaller, almost dental-like tools. So this is a pencil grinder. Sounds like the dentist. But all of these tools also have different tips. So like this grinder, you have all different shapes of tips. This pencil grinder has also different assortments of tips, and then there's also the right angle grinder or sander, and that takes different grits of sandpaper and is very helpful also. So there's a lot of refining, and actually the final you use files, because files are the most precise and best way of getting the surface right to the exact place you want it to be. So you can see some files there. Again, using the Mocha Master as the template. But then, of course, there were some places that had some casting imperfections that I filled in, and those then need to be ground down.
Does that for every copy?
Yep. Here it is in the refining stages. I've just done any spots or imperfections filled in, and that'll be ground down so that it'll be a nice surface, and then I'll mount it to the base. It's still not mounted to the base. Anyway, it's progressing nicely. Hard to tell, but it is. Okay, that's ground down. And so we're starting to get... Okay, well, getting a little closer. Just all the little details. Okay, so then I went out and got a stone. The stone needed also a little bit of fine tuning. So there are diamond tools that you can use to grind stone. So I wanted to make it perfectly flat. So you have the right angle grinder that's a diamond grinder, and it accepts water on one side, and you can see you can refine the shape of stone with various diamond tools. They're also required to drill holes into the stone, and this is a core drill, and this is the size that I used. So you're going to see, I'll show you the pictures, but you need to figure out a way of mounting this to the stone. So I bought solid rod without any threads, and I had to use a tap and a die. So the die is what you use to put threads on a rod. So I made threaded rod of this thing, and then a tap to allow, well, I'll show you that later. The tap is what makes the screw able to screw into something. Okay, we're getting there. So there's Mocha sitting on the base. Now that it's got a nice flat spot, I made a template where I'm going to use put the threaded rod into the stone. So I drilled those holes out, and so that shows you the tap. So the tap I used to make a specialized key that makes it so that no one can remove the sculpture from its base. So you can see on the front here, there's that very threaded rod hole, and there's a special screwdriver that I made. Here it is. So I made this screwdriver with this specialized key, so without this tool, you can't remove it from the base. So there's the screwdriver and how the threaded rod engages a bronze plate underneath. Okay, now Mocha's ready to be welded to the, well, actually first I welded the threaded rods to that plate, drilled the holes, which you can see in the stone. You can also see where I had to refine the stone with that grinder. And now the plate is inserted in the stone, and I use a very specialized epoxy material that's meant specifically for this. They can put in lamp posts and things with this epoxy, so it's really super strong. So it's an anchoring adhesive, 2-part epoxy, and it mixes. You squirt it into the holes and place that plate in with the threaded rod, and that's never coming out. So now the stone is being placed in the sculpture garden. Leveled. And meanwhile, I still have the last finishing touches to do on Mocha. So I'm there were holes in the base that I'm welding Mocha on from underneath, so you don't see any welds. You can still see I have like little circles on places I'm still refining. I wanted the surface to be perfect. Now you can see I filled in now some of these areas, and that's weld is going right into the hooves of Mocha, so it's attaching Mocha on all 4 hooves. It's attached now, and it's time to sandblast Mocha to prepare it for the patina. There it is sandblasted, so it removes any discolorations or oxidations from that long process. There's the sandblaster. It's a pressure pot, they call it, and it uses pressure from the top in order to get the exact flow of a mixture of sand and air. Okay, it's time to patina. Okay, it's time for the patina. And echoing myself. Everything looks good to this point. So this is the finale. Here we go. So in this case I used a hot patina. I think I mentioned it here.
This is the stone after it's been sandblasted, and now it needs the patina.
Can hardly hear it.
I'm putting on some ferric nitrate, cupric nitrate with a hot torch and a spray application. So here we go.
Right. So some people, or I often do too, use a paintbrush to apply patinas, but if you want something very even, you can use you can put the patina chemicals inside of a spray, they use this to paint cars or spray paint, but you can also put anything in it, and it puts an even coat over the surface rather than a paintbrush, which is more general. But it's a hot patina, which means you have to heat the whole sculpture up to just the right temperature, where it's not so hot that it turns black, but it's not too cool that it doesn't steam off the chemical. And that's cupric nitrate. Here we go. So it took probably an hour and a half approximately, maybe 2 hours. So this is over quite a period of time here. And you can see it's getting darker and darker, and done. It's kind of hard to see the color in that light, but there's a little better. So then the last step before installing it is to use wax to help preserve the patina and to give it a luster. And you can use, I used butcher wax at the beginning, or bowling alley paste they call it. They don't make this anymore, but it's what all the old school sculptors would use on their bronze, and then Renaissance wax, which is a little bit more of a softer wax for a higher polish.
Does it need to be re-waxed?
You should wax it every year. Yeah, it helps preserve the patina. If you don't do it every year, it'll start to turn towards the green shade of green, or in darker black green. Okay, after I don't know how many months it's been, October, think, till now. Mocha is finished. Thank goodness. One last spin.
I don't have a sense of how thick the bronze is.
What was the question exactly?
I don't have a sense of how thick the bronze is.
It's about 3/8 thick, so between 1/4 and 1/2 inch thick. The legs are solid. There's our dog meeting Mocha. And there he is in place.
That's fantastic, Benton. Thank you so much for the showing it to us and all the detail. Don't know who that was, but no.
That's the unveiling day we had not too long ago. And yeah, it was great. It was a real privilege to be able to, I've worked on a lot of other sculptures, but to be able to work on Ralph Manconi's Mocha was it's great to be able to relate to that very talented person through this process. So very enjoyable.
I'm so glad Mocha has found a permanent home here in a place that we love, Cape Cod.
So are there any questions?
How many hours, did you keep track of how many hours you put into this?
I didn't, but maybe my wife could tell us. I don't know, Yana. How long did it take me? I don't know. It's hard to know.
It's just an ongoing project for months and months.
Yeah.
This, the larger they are, the more difficult they are, just because of handling, or?
Actually, sometimes when sculptures are larger, the detail isn't there. I mean, the fact that this is so delicately done and so thoughtfully handled required that you pay attention to all the details.
So sometimes more difficult if it's smaller, or just?
It can be more difficult if it's smaller. The details are more refined. And yes, working on a monument, nobody is paying attention to the tiny details anymore. So it can be, you can get somewhere faster. Definitely.
Are foundries rarer now than as time goes on?
I think they're shifting a little bit. There's more in China, for instance. The Johnson Atelier where I worked closed down the foundry part, and they cast Seward Johnson's sculptures in China now. So I don't think there's less of them, because I think that people are still making monuments, but they're not all done here.
The foundry my father used was in New York City, over on the east side, right near the UN building. And after he died, they moved out to Danbury, Connecticut, and gradually were shifting their work. And the last I've heard, and this is the truth, they moved out to Las Vegas and were making poker chips, which was really a come down in my opinion, but maybe that's where the market is, I don't know.
Bronze?
Not bronze, no, they had just converted to, casting items for sale.
Any other questions? No. Well, I think I'm going to go out and put Mocha back on its base, and anybody's welcome to
You should know one thing, and that is the tribute to the New York Times today for Mocha.
Really?
Do you believe New York Times?
No.
What
It was a crossword puzzle answer was Mocha.
What was the clue?
What was the question?
What was the clue?
What was the clue? Well, thank you all for coming, and yeah, I'm sure we'll meet again around the crucible.
It's a lot of process. £36.
I think we should install a red light on your studio and turn on lights and
Down here, so that instead of getting the legs, you would end up getting something else. You'd end up getting the cheeks are missing. So anyways, the parts down here were missing. You should actually have a cheek here that would make a leg, and so it couldn't be used. There it is. You can see the string that's coming out of the ears to hold these cheeks in place when you put it back together. See all the intricate pieces. And so this would have been used to cast plaster positives. So first, Ralph would have sculpted this in clay, either water clay or oil clay. Do you know which your father liked to work in?
The oil-based one. He called it plastiline.
Yeah, plastiline, plasticine. So you start with, very pliable material to get to the best positive you can, and then you would make this mold, which over that plastiline, and then with this mold you could create now multiple positives in plaster or wax. So the plaster version there were two that I know of that are created from this mold, and there was one bronze, right?
Yeah, the bronze is the one you did, right?
Right.
But this one was done for my grandmother, my father's mother. He wasn't married then, and he made a copy for my grandmother probably in 1938 or so. And she moved often in her life. She was a widow. My grandfather died fairly young, as did my father, actually. And so it's a little banged up.
Right.
It had some repairs made to it. But you did show earlier in your display a better one that he made for his family, for my mother and the rest of us.
Right. So the challenge was to bring this plaster up to its full glory before we could even start making a new mold of it. And so there it is back in my studio. You can see the ears had been broken off at one point, and there's some cracks, and that the tail was also cracked, and that this part of the ear here was missing. So I was able to pull out the ear and epoxy it back together, and do the same on the other side, and squeeze the tail back together, and I used some filler to sculpt the tip of the ear again. Now we're getting closer to the point where we can start making the mold. So there are multiple ways of making molds. In this case, I'm using what's called a blanket mold. It's where you take the sculpture and you create you create what's going to be in rubber by sculpting clay in the shape that you want the rubber to be, so that you really get an accurate and precise keying of the rubber, and you get a very precise mold. Other ways that people use to make rubber molds are paint-on molds, where you would just take this sculpture and you slather on rubber with a paintbrush, and then it would cure, and you do it multiple times, but it's very hard to control. So I'm doing the blanket mold technique. So you need to figure out a stable way of having it on its side, and then I'm just getting it ready one last time for, and I'm using a wax so that the rubber doesn't stick to it. Okay, now I'm ready to figure out where my seam is going to be on the mold. Just like this mold, there's a primary seam. This is the mold I'm working on right now in this video, and I can show you the parts of it as we go. So I'm finding the seam by creating this clay barrier, and it's progressing more, and then I'm making keys. Just like in this mold, there's keys so that the two molds, when they fit together, they don't shift, so you get very good registration. It might be a little confusing, but when you get to the end, I think it'll be clearer. So I've found where the separation is going to be, and these dots are where rubber is going to be, and these keys are actually where plaster is going to end up being, because you're going to have a rubber mold nested inside of a plaster mother mold. Okay, so this is it's silicone rubber, and you can see those little dots are these dots here, and these keys are the keys on the edge in the mother mold. And this. So, and this all comes out from the mother mold, and obviously the mother mold is used so that the rubber doesn't have any flexing to it. It holds it firm and solid in place. And then on the back side you see these raised areas, and these are keys into the mother mold to make sure that the rubber is exactly, precisely as it's intended to be. Okay, so let's go through the process here. Okay, so I don't want to get Mocha dirty, so I'm covering him in tin foil, and now I'm creating what's going to be in rubber. So the lighter colored clay is will eventually become what's rubber, and so now I'm figuring out how the keys are going to go. And so now you see all the keys, and I've decided that I'm going to have the head separate, so I have a division there. And the thing with this blanket mold is it's cast, so that's what this pipe is at the top. So I've now covered that plaster in, I covered the clay in plaster. The 1/2 So yeah, that's just one half. And it's still, and now it's time to take the blanket out that represents the rubber and pour the rubber through that tube to get half of the rubber mold. Okay, so I used a little shellac to just show where the edges are, and I think I'm pretty much ready to go here. So opening up the mother mold, and the clay is all stuck inside the mother mold here, and the tinfoil came off, and the ear, but that's all right, we'll put it back on again. And so this shows you the, okay, the mother mold is got a release agent on it, the head and the body, and the goat is now ready to be covered with that mother mold, and we will pour the rubber into it. Here we go. So you can see in that picture, in these pictures, there's a gap. And that gap shows you where the blanket was. So that gap is going to be filled with rubber. So it's all put together. There's, I'll probably say it in the video here. Okay, it's all sealed up, and the seams are coated with water clay, and we're ready to mix the rubber and pour. There are holes drilled into the shell, the mother mold, and those are to let the air out, and we'll plug those with clay as we go. And so that's weighted down so that the rubber doesn't push it up. Top of the mother mold, and I've circled the holes so I can see them easily, because everything happens very quickly. Once you pour the rubber in, you've got to, you can't have too many issues here. There's some time lapse mixing the rubber. Pour, and so that's filling that void and creating this. And there's where the tube used to be. I just trimmed it down.
Is the rubber non-toxic?
This rubber is non-toxic.
That's because you're not wearing any.
Yeah, there used to be rubbers when I worked at the Johnson Atelier that were toxic. Black Tuffy was the name, and it was lead-based, and it was pretty nasty stuff. But they've come up with these two-part silicone rubbers now that are, you don't have to weigh everything to the tiniest degree, and it's much more forgiving, and it's non-toxic. So the
It's a long process.
casting seems to have completed its cycle, 75 minutes after we poured. And I think, we'll keep on going here because we're not even halfway done with the mold. Okay, so you can see the rubber. Okay, I got the mother mold off the rubber mold, and the rubber looks like it cast very nicely around the goat. And so this is all rubber. And the goat is underneath this blanket. So next we'll take off this blanket and see how the goat fared. Okay. So there's the goat after we took the rubber off, and it's time to do the other side now. So what you see here on the bottom half of the goat is just temporary. It's nothing. It'll be reclaimed, because now that we have this side of the goat, we'll be able to use this as to create the second half right on top of. So there's the goat. You can kind of see where the plaster seam was. And now you've fitted back into its, okay, the goat is back in its rubber mold on the one half and the mother mold on the one half. And now it'll be time to do the same process on this half by making a blanket, making the mother mold, taking off the mother mold on this half, removing the blanket, reinstating the mother mold, and casting the rubber on this half. So here we go. Okay, so there's the blanket, and then the plaster mother mold over the blanket. I had removed, I missed a step there where I opened it up and removed Mocha. So Mocha, oh sorry, no, this is still the first half. So Mocha is in there, but I removed the blanket and put it back together. So there's the void where the rubber will go now. And we're gonna cast that second half, which we did. So now we have both halves complete. So the mold is done. So now it's time to make it into wax. So this is the ancient lost wax process. Like I said, with sand casting, there's other ways of doing it where you have a pattern and impress into sand and cast into that void. But in this case, we're doing it the ancient lost wax method, and so we need to make a wax positive to then melt out of, well, you're going to see. We're going to end up making a positive. You basically go from positive to negative to positive to negative to positive in order to get it into bronze. Okay, so I'm clamping it together. I've got it, the wax cools from the outside in, so you can fill. Here's the head of Mocha, so that's you can see the wax in there, and so once it's filled to the top with molten wax, it solidifies from the outside in, and when it's the right thickness, then you pour out the excess, and that gives you the thickness that you're looking for in bronze. A lot of people think bronze is like this or solid. There are anything that's thicker than maybe 1.5 inches has to be hollow. Otherwise, the bronze shrinks, and you end up with pits and voids on the surface. So any monumental sculptures you see, all are hollow, and they're usually about between 1/4 and 1/2 inch thick. Now it's time to cast the part in wax using rebar to hold the mold together, and it's filled. There's the head, half taken out of the rubber. And there's the body. Okay, so now it's the time to do the casting. So I used to do the casting at my place, but it involves keeping a ceramic shell mixture, which is called it's a slurry, and it settles, and so it has to be in continuous motion, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and so since I'm not in the business of casting anymore, I went to the Carney studio, which is in Provincetown, and John Keith does this process, and so I brought him the waxes, and he put on the sprues, which I'll show you in a second. So you see there's more than just the goat here. This is where the neck hole was. There's a leg here, and another leg and another leg, and there's actually a hole here to help dry this ceramic shell. So the ceramic shell is a slurry, like I said, where you'll take that wax that has all this plumbing attached to it. It has a cup attached to it. It has what they call gates, which are wax tubes attached to it, and it has vents. So the gates let the bronze into the mold, and the vents let the air out. And this is what would be called a waste mold, because it's created in order to be broken off after it's cast in bronze. So here are some examples of gates. You know, this is where you put a cup on top of this and attach it to the wax mocha, and then you'd have some vents that would come up, and they tend to be bent and go on top of the cup. So when you pour in the metal, it all goes down into the casting, and then the air all comes up and out. So it's, I like to think of it as the plumbing to allow the bronze into the waste mold, the ceramic shell waste mold. So this piece had been dipped into the ceramic slurry probably 8 times. So you dip it, it air dries. Well, you dip it, you actually sprinkle sand on the outside, it air dries, and you do it 8 times in order to build up the right thickness. There's another picture. You can see more clearly here the legs, and there's a hole that was cut in the side of Mocha to allow the ceramic shell to dry properly in the inside of the wax. And there's here's the base down at the bottom of Mocha, and there's the cutout from the side of Mocha. So there's the John Keith studio. There's John Keith. He's going to do he's going to take the slag off the top, and we're going to cast Mocha. So yeah, I guess I should go back one step. You do have to turn the ceramic shell upside down, put it in a chamber, almost like a furnace, and then heat it up until the wax all melts out. And you want to make it so there's absolutely no residue in the waste mold, the ceramic shell waste mold. And basically you're left with a vessel just waiting to accept the bronze. And while that vessel is red piping hot, and you heat it up, you end up, then that's when you pour the bronze in. You take that ceramic shell out and you pour the bronze in. And there it is at the Carney studio, and I picked off some of the shell just to make sure we got it, and we did. So you can see here much more clearly the gates and the vents. So there's the cup, and you can see this vent goes to the top of the cup, and there's a big sprue that goes right into Mocha, and another sprue attached to the tail. So putting on this plumbing is part of the science or the art of bronze casting, is knowing how the metal will flow, what areas are thick and need maybe a little reservoir of metal so that it can draw metal from. So there's quite an art to figuring out the spruing system. And there's the base, and there's Mocha's side, and there's Mocha's head in the ear. So there's the head again. So I was given these parts. There's John. He's cut off the sprues and gave me all the parts. There's a head, there's a body, there's the plug for the side, and the base, which isn't attached. And I brought it back to my studio. There I am in my studio. I'm getting ready to start putting it back together. So those are